welcome to the Misbehavior Podcast. I'm Colette.
And I'm Kurt.
And we are the hosts, and we're going to talk all things student conduct for conduct professionals. We are super excited in our developmental growth. We're going to have our first guest, the very brave Jessica Ecock Rotondo, who I think I mentioned on the very first episode of Misbehavior. Jessica is somebody that I hold in high esteem, and I probably learned more from in my career than anybody I've ever worked with.
It's very sweet.
You're setting the bar very high here.
Just started as a conduct nerd like all of us, but has transitioned now post-university to the Morgan Levy law firm. And we want to know about life after conduct. But just you want to introduce yourself. And our first question for everybody is always going to be, tell us about a time that you got in trouble yourself.
Okay. Hi, world. I am Jessica Ecock Rotondo. It's a mouthful. I'm thinking of a time where I got in trouble, or could have gotten in trouble. I was a pretty scrappy kid. I wasn't like the happy-go-lucky person I am now. And I was mean and rough. I got into fights on the school bus, whatever. But one thing that stands out of my mind, which is really gross, and you'll judge me for it, and that's okay. I've moved on. That was 20 years ago. But me and some friends got mad at another friend, and we went over to her house. Her mom's car was in the driveway, and it was the summer, and we all rubbed our bare, sweaty feet all over the door handles. It was so gross. It's disgusting. We didn't get caught. We made up and we were friends with her again. We never asked if her hand smelled or anything, but I'm just thinking about that, like how horrible that was. I should not have done those behaviors. Also, how horrible it would have been to have my parents find out and make that a bigger deal. So I'm glad I didn't get caught, but I'm ashamed of what I did.
Now, did the mom come up with like some kind of mysterious hand fungus or anything like that?
Not that I know of. So I feel safe. I feel like we didn't give her a disease or anything.
That's good. So karmically, you're okay, I think.
I hope so. I'm not proud of that. I'm not proud.
Did you grow up in an environment where being tough was just part of surviving the experience?
From Staten Island, and I would say being tough is a big part of it, but also being angry. Like everyone in Staten Island is just angry all the time. Where we have like the highest road rage in the country. I still have road rage, like horrible road rage. It's even worse in Rochester, where I live now. And it's New York City, even though it's, the forgotten borough. Everyone is tough. Everyone always has their game face on. No one smiles at each other. So you do have to act differently. I didn't learn how to smile at strangers on the street until I went to college. And people were smiling at me and I was taken aback. Yeah.
Is it because of the proximity to the Statue of Liberty? Is that a factor?
I don't know. It really is. I mean, I never watched the Jersey Shore. Obviously, I know what it's about, but that's a lot of people from Staten Island. There's just like this toxic anger. And I think people all over the city are just like, have like a toughness to them. But for some reason, Staten Island, I always call it an anger. I think it's different. It might be less the Statue of Liberty, more the dump. The New York City's dump was there for 50 years. So I don't know if toxic chemicals leached into our system, made us all angry, but that's how it is.
But you've channeled that anger into something productive, it sounds like.
Yeah. It's interesting, the turnaround.
I'm always interested in superhero origin stories. So you went from that to choosing a liberal arts college very close to where I grew up in the middle of nowhere in rural New York.
Yes.
How did that happen, and how did that shape your evolution?
Yeah. I loved English and communications. I loved poetry. And I really wanted to go to school to be an English major. And my father said, we are not paying for you to go to school to be an English major. Or a private school. I said, okay. But Alfred University, where I wound up going, started sending me all these pamphlets. So, of course, I don't know how they got my name from high school or whatever. And they specifically sent me pamphlets about English and their poetry classes and their Shakespeare classes. And I was thinking, I need to go there. This is just drawing me. And then I remember so we did go to visit. And when I walked onto campus, I just felt like that's where I belonged. I really just had a feeling. I've had that feeling a few times in my life, but I just said, this is it. Alfred University is for me. And I was with my dad and my mom, and my dad said, you're not going to be an English major here for $30,000 a year or whatever. I said, yeah, I want a double major in English and communications. And he somehow thought communications would be more lucrative. And he was like, okay, great. I still regret it. I took out way too many loans. I mean, I regret taking out loans. I do not regret going to Alfred. And my mom said, what are you going to do here? There's no mall. And I said, I know. But I like it here. And then my father and I, a few months later, went up, just the two of us, for accepted student weekend. And I put a deposit down and signed my name that I was going. My mom was not happy, but I loved it. I felt like Alfred really was the thing that transformed me from the angry, obnoxious girl I was to like a very happy, positive person. I think it was the nature. I saw deer and stars and cows for the first time. I was just like overwhelmed with how pretty it was there, how much space we had. And I really think that totally mellowed me out those 4 years. And then I went back home after I graduated and wound up going back to Alfred for graduate school for 2 years. I loved it so much. Wow. I went there twice. Yeah. But yeah, that all helped me get into student conduct. So this maybe or maybe not interesting. When I started college with English communications, I really wanted to work for a beauty magazine. I wanted to work for Vogue or Cosmo, one of those. And so then I realized at some point that I hated journalism. And I like communications, but I didn't want to talk to people or interview people like a journalist. And throughout my few years there, it really changed from me wanting to work for a beauty magazine to actually me wanting to work for a beauty company to me wanting to go to student affairs. And me wanting to go into student affairs only happened in March of my senior year, which... Wow. Is not the best time to decide you want like a change of career, or your path has been one thing. I was the secretary for the radio station. I was a DJ. Like I had all of the communication stuff down. And then I was actually in the Black Student Union, and we were looking for a new advisor. And Alfred is very small, and there were maybe 2 faculty members of color. And so we were interviewing them to be our advisor. And talking to them got me really riled up, and I decided I wanted to do student affairs. I want to help college students. I want to help colleges be more diverse, figure this out. And I decided then I wanted to be in multicultural affairs, which is what it was called in 2006 when I was there. So then I changed course and I talked to people who were in those fields, and I thought that's what I was going to do. I was going to just go into diversity work for colleges. That changed when I had my first contact hearing in graduate school. So to help pay for graduate school, I was a residence director, which most people know what that is. You supervise a building and RAs. And part of the job at, I think, almost every college of RD is to do student contact hearings. And I really didn't want to, because at that point, I was no longer my angry Staten Island self ready to confront everyone. I was my sweet Alfred University Jessica self. And I really was nervous about having this difficult conversation with a student. My very first one was a student. So I supervised a freshman building. So he was young, 17, 18, 19. And he had been caught with pot, with cannabis. So I just remember being sweaty, clammy, nervous. We had it in my office. My office has all windows. And he came in, and I didn't want to start the conversation. I was avoiding it. So I just kept talking to him as a person, right? Like not talking about the conduct thing, this marijuana thing that was illegal at the time. It was, what are you doing? How are classes? Everything I could to avoid that conversation. But then we had this great conversation about the radio station. So it's funny I mentioned that I was a DJ, because he said, I really want to join the radio station. I want to be a DJ. And I was like, I was. So we talked about that. And then I felt, because we were having that connection, I could ease into the, what are you doing? What happened? I got this report. And the conversation went so well that not only like that inspired me, but it was really maybe a few days later when I was sitting in my office with all the windows, he came in the front door and he came over, he saw I was in there. He came over, talked to me. He said, I signed up for the radio station. Like even after we had that good connection, the fact that he came over to me and told me something that was part of our conversation, I was like, I need to do student conduct. I love it. I love having these conversations. And that really started my love for it. It definitely was my very first conduct hearing.
Wow.
Sorry, I also talk a lot, so please interrupt me.
No, that was a great story.
Thank you.
So how did you get good at it? Because there's a lot of not awesome conduct practice out there where it is scoldy and not getting to know students as real people. So was it just in you, or did you have people that, like, there were key moments for you that changed you? It sounds like you had that nugget in you right from your very first student interaction.
Yeah, I think it's sort of like anything, like any sport, any instrument. Some of it is inherent and then some of it is learned. And I just think that's like personality based. What's in you? What can you have the difficult conversations we always hear? And I think this is part of something I was reading about your podcast, like the job nobody wants to do on a college campus, right? So you either have to be interested in doing that kind of work and then get good at it, or you know in your heart you cannot do that work. But I think so Alfred, where I started, I think they encouraged those kinds of conversations. So that was good. They weren't strict scolding, you have to do X, Y, or Z, slap on the hand. It was have conversations and get them education so that they could learn. Dean Norm Pollard was a person who really impacted me. He had been in his job a long time, but he was so incredibly curious. He would always be reading. He'd always be reading research about student conduct, books. And I was always impressed with that if someone who'd been in his job for so long was still interested in learning more. So he was the first person who brought up restorative justice to me when we were doing a training. And so it was like, okay, let's talk about restorative justice. And he really just was amazing at giving that education. So it definitely started from a place where I was able to be freer in my conversations. I don't think I would have enjoyed ever working for a college where I wasn't. I mean, you always have to lay down the line, but there are different ways to do that. And there are like more humane ways to do that. I was thinking when I was talking about this student in general, it's sort of the same question, but reverse. What popped into my mind is when I had that conversation with that student, it was because of that student body. He was able to have that conversation with me because schools attract certain students. And then I moved on to Ithaca College, and I was definitely able to have a different kind of conversation with Ithaca students that I then had with U of R, University of Rochester students, and then RIT students. So the atmosphere does impact how you could talk to students in their student conduct hearing, the philosophy of the school, and whoever's above you telling you to be strict or educational or restorative definitely impacts you, but also like that student body, and they're figuring out what ways you could connect with them and have that real conversation. And I think Alfred was great to have that like one-on-one conversation, but I always think of Ithaca College because those students I was able to have, I think, the best conversations with because they were the most real in that I could be like, what are you doing? You know, I could put a fist up like this or like, don't come back to my office. And they'd be like, I know. And they were very funny. They were very creative because I would be like, what do you think should be the outcome? And they were like, I shouldn't be in trouble. And we would laugh. And then I was like, no, but really. So it's just interesting how that also changes student conduct. But that's what I was thinking with that student. I was like, I'm so glad that was my first experience, that student was open to talking to me. Maybe if he hadn't been or he was rude, maybe it would have changed my trajectory. I don't know. I've never really thought about it. Now I'm thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love how we're talking about how culture and the culture of the institution and leadership at the institution impacts how you do the work.
Yeah.
And I had a very similar experience with you. I had never before working with you, the whole concept of community standards was foreign to me. So it can sometimes just take one person to completely shift your perspective on how you do the work that you do.
Yeah.
And it's nice that you had that as your very first experience. You didn't have to unlearn anything.
I know. It was great. I'm not saying I'm perfect or I was great, but I'm glad that was the experience I had.
Yeah.
I feel like it put me in a space I wanted to be. So unlearning things would have been hard, but also I was just comfortable. That's how I view student conduct. It should be conversational, educational, and still hold the line. So I do feel lucky.
And how cool that you also stumbled upon that, like, because it almost sounds like it was happenstance that You were trying to avoid
Yeah.
having the tough conversation,
Yeah.
and you stumbled into this like, oh,
Yeah.
I should establish rapport with the student before we have the. We're not just going to dive into
Yeah.
what did you do?
Right.
Why are you here? I love that.
It's building
It's
rapport
great.
101, but it was like mind
Yeah.
blowing to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last week we were talking about getting students to tell the truth and my ego investment in like relationship building was almost manipulative for me because I felt like if I could get the student warmed up that they would tell the truth. But then there was so much more to learn about them, and it was so great. So Jessica worked at University of Rochester where they did floor circles, which were really similar to the community standards program that Kurt and I
Cool. Okay.
administered.
Yeah, we had just started it when I was there. I helped like get it going in the res halls.
Do you find, because in cognitive theory, how once you've learned something at a more complex level, you can never go back. Where some developmental theories, you go back and forth. But when you have experienced a really functional, healthy conduct environment, and then you go somewhere else, for me, there's a lot of friction there. Like, it is hard to watch bad practice. Because you've worked lots of in different cultures, how have you found that?
That's a good question because I do think, like, even at U of R, there were good things. There was this focus on restorative practices, but there were also some negative things because of the prestige of the college. There's a lot of pressure from the administration. They're not dictating what you should do, but it walks the line. And I didn't have that at any other college that I worked for. And that definitely changes what you do, especially when you want to be restorative. So I think there's good and bad everywhere. And I think it depends, like it's dependent on who I was at the moment, my role, like if I felt I could give that feedback because I was responsible for supervising the person I didn't see doing a good job, or I've had bosses where I could give that feedback to, even though they're my supervisor. We have that relationship where I'm like, ooh, what happened there? Or could we talk about that? But sometimes you also feel powerless because if you come into a culture that's completely like 3 strikes and you're out, you may not be, and you're an RD or an assistant director of conduct, you may not have that opportunity to move the needle, or it might take a long time, or you have to build up a lot of social, what's it called? Like social credit, social,
Cachet.
yeah,
Cachet.
yeah, like you need to do that and work your way in. So, but it's hard. It's hard to see someone not do the great work because I think in the end it's hurtful to students. And I think one of the reasons that I liked conduct too is that I'm into fairness. Like I'm a Libra, the scales are very important to me. So I think that's where I get angry if I see something that's impacting the students, or we're being like so lenient and not doing the process or following our policies for this student. Well, then it's not fair to all the other students. And that's what made me more mad than just one person maybe saying a thing I wouldn't say in a conduct hearing, or, not being good at building rapport. There are some things like you could forgive and a person keep learning. And then some things where it just doesn't feel right. And that's really hard to wrap your head around.
So you're a Libra. What's your Myers-Briggs?
I am an ENFJ.
Okay.
And I'm a Virgo. I'm on the cusp. I'm September 23rd. So I've been called a Vibra, but I say I'm mostly a Libra with Virgo tendencies. Yeah. Because I'm neurotic and, all the Virgo, like, perfectionist tendencies, but I'm really, like, a Libra at heart, so.
We're all J's here, I think we've established,
Yeah.
so.
We like to get some stuff done.
Yep.
One of the big changes you made at RIT that I have never found traction for other places is when I think you led the process to get rid of the middle sanction between probation and warning.
We did, and we got rid of deferred suspension,
Yep.
which was basically nothing, right? It was double secret probation. So why do we have it? Like, let's be real. It's not anything. Yeah.
And now it comes up sometimes like, we need to have a deferred suspension. I'm like, it just always feels like a scare tactic to me.
Right.
Was that hard? Because I was not in the conduct office at that point. Was that a tough sell?
So it was committee that we were reviewing our code of conduct. So it was part of this year-long process that I led with like 13 different people. We had ad hoc committees for like the alcohol and drug policy, athletic policy. It was awesome. So I feel like we were able to build like to a place where we were thinking educationally and restoratively. We also had students on the committee and we would ask them questions. So if it doesn't mean anything to the students, it doesn't feel like it's our philosophy because it feels fake and just sounds mean, and that's not really our philosophy. Why do we have it? So the committee went along with it and we proposed it and everyone went along with it. We actually got pushback. That was the same committee where we decided not to call them sanctions anymore. And I believe RIT still doesn't call them sanctions because that feels very legal, very criminal. It sounds like you owe money. So we talked about that a lot with the students, and the students were like, we don't know what that means. And when we hear it, we think we're going to court. So we changed that and we changed it to statuses. Like you have a status with the college. Your status is you're on probation. At RIT it was you're on a warning. That was the first time I'd ever heard that. Like you're on a warning for a year. Or you're on suspension, right? You're on suspension for a year. So we changed that. And that's where we got a little pushback from our legal office. I just don't think they were wrapping their heads around. They weren't part of those educational conversations and hearing from the students. And I think they were like, no, everyone calls it a sanction. We should call it a sanction. And we were like, no. And we got it. We got it passed. So that was cool.
Now, can I ask, I'm not familiar with deferred probation. Like, what's an example of when somebody might get deferred probation?
I think we had deferred probation and deferred suspension, actually. It adds all these levels, right? So warning is the lowest, and then deferred probation is if that's the second level, and then if you do something else, you'll be put on probation, and if you do something else, be put on deferred suspension, and that means the next time you get in trouble, you'll be suspended. But if that's not actually what happens because there's fundamental fairness and due process, and you're not automatically going to suspend a student just because they're in deferred suspension and they, I don't know, picked up someone's ID, but they didn't spend $1 on it. Am I suspending you? I don't know. It feels silly. So it's always like, it adds levels, you know, it builds this system that I feel like is fake.
It is. And if probation doesn't mean probation anymore. Like, that's fake. And if I remember, the letter template used to say, you have been suspended, period. But we're going to give you a break and let you stay here. And like, ooh, that is a mixed message.
Yes. Deferred suspension. Yeah. When students are like, I'm suspended. I'm like, you are, you know, or even other schools I work for. I think all of them had deferred suspension. And you're like, no, you weren't suspended. But it's very scary because that is the first sentence. Or deferred housing removal. That was a big one too. Do something again. We're going to remove you from housing. Are we really?
Free eviction.
Right, like if they put a tack in their wall, are we going to, and they might want it, right? Like at Ithaca, there was a housing requirement and students wanted me to kick them out because they wanted to live off of campus. So yeah, I don't know where it's going with that, but deferred removal from housing was a thing too, I think. It probably still is, but.
With all those levels, I just think, you know, from a fairness standpoint, the potential disruption for other students, like I think of students that I had to meet with 3, 4, and 5 times. These weren't situations where they were just making choices that impacted them. They were pulling fire alarms or just being generally disruptive to the entire community. So yeah, interesting.
And sometimes, and if you get rid of layers, then you really have to, I think, make sure you know what is probation worthy, what is suspension worthy, when will we kick out a student, because you don't want everyone impacted all the time. So you have to stand, if you only have 3 layers instead of 5, you got to stand by that and actually suspend students if it's warranted.
I loved walking into what you created though, because when I said a warning really meant a warning.
Yeah.
And we weren't trying to posture, like, it's worthy of a warning.
Yep. You're in good
Don't
standing.
we all deserve a warning for most things?
Yeah, right. Although I just watched, and this isn't related, but I just watched, it's kind of, that documentary about the high school catfishing. Have you heard about that?
Oh, I saw that came up in my feed. Is it good?
It's really good. It's really good. I think, like, you know the plot, like you'll know it, but I won't spoil anything. But the person who they find out is the bully said, well, everyone makes mistakes and everyone gets arrested. Everyone gets arrested for DWIs. and everyone, it's the same. And so it was just a really interesting, well, there's something mentally ill with her. She is not, or whoever it was, the bully, like that, she's far beyond, I think, the conversation we would have with students. But it was very interesting to think about how this person is thinking about accountability and their actions, completely not taking responsibility. And it's interesting because this was an adult person. And I think I never had a conversation like that with a student. It was never that bad. They never would just be that resistant to taking responsibility or being held accountable. I would always talk to students about when they use the word mistake. I always corrected them. I said it wasn't a mistake. That was my favorite thing. I was like, it wasn't a mistake. It was a choice you made, or a series of bad choices. So let's talk through that. And seeing this person on the screen yesterday, I was thinking, oh man, I wish I could be her judge. I have so much to say to her. It's very intriguing.
Yeah, I think there could be a whole episode on the intersection of mental health and conduct. I just personally think narcissism is an unspoken pandemic in the United States right now. And when you see it in the workplace and in student settings, it's so alarming to me that people can walk into an otherwise peaceful situation and drag all that manipulation with them. It's scary.
Oh, yeah.
And when you said it was an adult, I was thinking of the documentary about the Duke lacrosse team.
Oh.
I don't know if you've seen that. It's quite a few years old now, but there was what the students did, but watching the parents was what alarmed me. Of like, don't you want to sit your son down and just talk about decisions that were made and gender and just being a good human? And nope.
Yeah.
They were the victims.
Yep. I think that's so when I worked at U of R, they were basically in the Ivy Leagues. That's where they consider themselves. So we would have conduct meetings with other Ivy League schools. So we did meet with Duke, and I'm pretty sure it was that same incident. And hearing that conduct officer, the way he was treated was miserable and disgusting. And so to pull it back to conduct too, like that person sitting there trying to have that conversation with a student whose parents are saying the opposite. And you're like, no, don't listen to your parents. And how do you say that as a conduct officer? That's the difficult. I remember in Ithaca, marijuana was huge in Ithaca. Everyone smoked. And I remember talking to this woman. She was like, well, my mom smokes. And I was like, how do I talk to you about this? Right? You're seeing it at home and okay. But like, so that was interesting too.
Yep.
Yeah. When you're going against.
Love this work.
Right?
One of the great things about the pandemic, since you brought that up, Kurt, was they opened stuff up, like Jess's dissertation defense. I got to actually be there.
Jess, what was your topic?
Oh, I don't remember like the fun name I had, but it was basically looking at gender identity and the way conduct officers believe their gender identity was perceived and reacted to by students. And it was
very cool.
Very interesting. Yeah. Women, basically, people who identified as women, conduct officers, overwhelmingly reported that they were treated differently and with less respect than their male colleagues. And it was interesting to have people who identified as male write in and say, I think my women colleagues are treated worse than me. Like, so it was a really interesting topic for me. I love just like gender studies, being able to reach out to the ASCA audience and get people to respond. I think almost 400 people do it. Like, how cool is that? And
that's amazing.
Yeah, and it was quantitative, and they got to write in comments. The quantitative was great. Statistically, it was significant. Women are treated worse in these roles. Probably a lot behind that, right? Like women seen in authority figures. There's cool research about like business people in the workplace, how women managers are treated compared to male managers who are disciplining their employees. Some really sad information. We know there's differences the way faculty members are treated and evaluated because of their gender identity. I was even looking at judges because I was trying to find anything to add to the literature because there's not much for higher ed or student conduct. Having the stats was great, but these quotes it was like heartbreaking. I remember just having them all, I printed them, they were all over my dining room table. And it was so like amazing to read because it felt like transformative in some ways. Like I just like had all these thoughts, and I don't know if the participants were ever asked these things or sat down and thought about those things, but it was so sad at the same time reading all these comments. So it was, I love it. I loved doing that. And then, you know, I don't know, COVID happened, and I don't know if people are worried about gender identity and student conduct and graduate programs. But
I love it. I spent most of my graduate work looking at gender stratification in higher education.
whoa,
And then my doctoral dissertation also dealt with gender identity and sexual orientation.
awesome.
So I'd love to talk to you about that sometime.
Yeah.
I have all my Margolis articles still saved in my Google Drive.
I did a lot with gendered organizations. Acker, I think it was. I don't know. I have to look, but all of that, like the theory of gendered organizations was mind blowing to me because it's common sense. It's like what you see. Like, yeah, when teachers were mostly men, it was more highly valued than now when it's mostly women. And so it makes sense. But to have that name and theory and research go behind it, you're like, wow. This is really systemic, right? This is a thing, and it's been going on for a long time. And how do we change it? And
it came up a lot in the Research One institution I worked at because gender stratification, as far as the STEM buildings on campus, were all high tech and paid for by large companies. In our education building, we had some light bulbs and no warm running water. It was
yeah,
playing out on our campus. So yeah, it's important research. So thank you for doing that.
yeah. Yours sounds really interesting.
Are there things, Jess, that we could take from that you wish practitioners could just do right now? Like small changes that could have impact?
That's a good question. It's hard too because it's the way the students are perceiving the conduct officer or how the conduct officer thinks the student's perceiving them. So it's hard to say, like, change your behavior, change the way you dress, because that's not really fair, or anything is the student's problem, right, if they're being rude.
Mm-hmm.
But I mentioned about, like, male colleagues really noticing, that stands out to me. And I think if people are aware of gender dynamics and can see it play out in their workplace, like if people could be open to it, especially if men could be open to it and think, wow, this woman is being treated like crap. How do you stand up for your colleagues? It doesn't mean, I know there's also a balance. You're not going to step in and take over the conduct hearing because she's a woman and maybe she's being disrespected, right? Like that's also disrespectful. But I think people in student affairs are more intelligent than that. There could be conversations about sex dynamics, race dynamics, power dynamics, and standing up for each other and telling other people, if your office reports to a dean of students, can you make sure that dean knows that there are differences in the way these two conduct officers are being perceived, because that impacts how their evaluations turn out and things like that. Or the dean thinking, my woman conduct officer is always getting screamed at. I always get the parents and the lawyers. Well, it could be just because she's a woman. They don't like that she suspended that student, but the male conduct officer is suspending as many students as her. So just like informing other people, I think is really helpful. And then I really
think
a
great professional development piece for people who supervise conduct officers. I didn't even think of that. That would be phenomenal.
Yeah. So that's what I'm thinking, like sharing with others, or even just, I don't know, having those conversations with students. I think calling them out on it too. Like if there's two people, if you have two conduct officers in a hearing and one of them notices, that could be really powerful for the man to say, you're treating my coworker like crap. Is it because she's a woman? Or for the female, like a woman conduct officer, to call out a student and say, would you do this if I were a man? You know, I don't know. It depends on, of course, your role, how secure you feel in that role, like you won't get fired, and your student body, and can you have that conversation? But I think it does stem from the students perceiving women a certain way, and then they're going to negatively react. At least that's what my research says. They'll react more negatively towards a woman than a man disciplining them. So how do you show it back to them with a mirror? Like, this is what I think you're doing. Is that true? And get them to think about it and talk through it.
I would love someone to take this forward now because I'm thinking about institution type and how that could
Mm-hmm.
amplify.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think there are schools, the way you were talking about Ithaca is the way I feel right now at my school. Like, I bet I could have that
Mm-hmm.
conversation more easily at
Mm-hmm.
my current school
Mm-hmm.
than some places where, oh, the defensiveness and
Mm-hmm.
uh, yeah, I'd love to see if that is true or not.
Yeah. You reminded me too, there were a few people who worked at small Christian colleges who identified as female, as women, and said that they had to, this was more an expectation from their administration, because I also asked those questions, that they had to still wear skirts, dresses, makeup. And if they weren't wearing makeup, how did that present them in a student conduct hearing? It was so there were some, it wasn't many. It's not going to be enough to be like statistically significant, but there were a few quotes from people, from women saying, I'm expected to look like this, look a certain way. And that might have been the whole student affairs division, or everyone is expected to look that way. But then talking about why is that important for a student conduct officer, and is feminizing this person going to be more harmful for them? I don't know, right? Like, but ultimately, I think you should be yourself and the school should respect it. But thinking about that small population was very interesting.
That would be a great qualitative follow-up
Mm-hmm.
study.
Yeah.
Somebody get
It
on this right
would.
now.
I know. Come on, students. Do people still want to
We
go
are
into student conduct at all?
we had some great candidates in our last couple searches, so
Good. All right.
yeah. I don't know how, that it's a huge quantity, but compared to some other positions,
Good.
high quality. They're still awesome people.
Excellent.
One last question.
Okay.
So tell us about life on the outside. So you have made the transition to life beyond the university.
Yes.
How is it? What do you miss?
I do miss students. I miss some of my colleagues too. I worked with really great people in every school I worked in, but I've liked all my students, but the last place I worked was RIT, and the longest, I worked there for 10 years almost. And I love them. Like, I miss doing student conduct with RIT students. But I'm really happy I'm not doing it. Like, I worked during COVID, so that was horrible, right? Having those conduct hearings about vaccination. So I think that was a pretty crappy time to be in student conduct. But I feel like I also left at a good point right after AI was coming in as a big thing. And I was thinking about academic dishonesty and what's that going to look like until schools figure out AI. And then all of the protests around Israel and Gaza. I was like, I can't imagine being a student conduct officer right now and probably philosophically being torn about maybe what your school's telling you to do. And you want to have these conversations. So I was like, I think I got out at the right time. And I work for a law firm that specifically focuses on civil rights. So I still get to do Title IX things. Like, I was just writing something the other day and I was like, yeah, I know all about this. And this should have been available. And you should have let her do this. So I still get a taste of it. I think if I worked for a law firm that was medical malpractice, I'd probably be sad. It's still meaningful to work with clients, but since I still have that attachment to schools, we do discrimination cases. It feels like I'm home a little, and it's nice because I'm not the decision maker anymore. You're suing the people who made the decision or the administration for not doing it. And I was like, phew, I'm glad I'm on the other side now, that I could say that person did a really crappy job. I'm really sorry. So life after conduct has been great. I think life after higher ed could be great. All my friends who've left love it. I think we all work remotely. You just have more freedom. Wow. So, and I realized when I left, higher ed was a cult. I'm one of those people who thinks higher ed and student affairs was very cult-like. And you're programmed to think a certain way. Your programs work very hard for very little money and resources, and just to do it so that you could say you help students. And it's very meaningful to be a helper. But at the end of the day, I was like, that really wasn't fair. My last 15 years of my career, my jobs weren't fair to me. I should have been enjoying it more. I should have been paid more. I should have had more free time. And you don't realize that until you're out of the field. So it's interesting to look back. But I'm really only looking forward. I missed it, but I also don't miss it.
Do you think you'd ever come back to higher ed?
Probably never full time. If like a consultant gig, or I thought about maybe being a traveling hearing officer, or like working for one of those companies like Grand River Solutions, or one of those people who hire out hearing officers, maybe. But even so, I don't know. I think I'm out of the game. I'll always have like the skills I had, but I feel like I've stopped improving. I don't know like the current.
Yeah.
I know the current laws, but I don't know the current tone of conversations that's being had in student conduct. I don't know what they're having conversations about with AI and all of these things, and I just feel like maybe I'd be out of it a little bit. I don't know. Maybe I'll go be a judge. That's what I want to do.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm like, which judgeship can I get without getting a law degree? Because there are a few in like small towns. Maybe I'll be
Collective,
Judge
yeah.
Ecock Rotondo.
I love it.
Jessica, you are just as wonderful as I remember.
Thank you.
I have a feeling we're going to want to bring you back.
Oh,
if
wow.
nothing else, we got to continue that cult conversation.
Yes. Yeah.
That is important.
People might be mad I said it, but I said it. And I believe it.
And now it deserves some interrogation.
Yep. And I used my Hamilton mug for you, Colette. Colette introduced me to Hamilton.
Oh my gosh. I used the mug that you gave me. I don't know if it was my birthday or Christmas one year, but it's very special to me.
Oh.
So cute.
Well, thanks for having me on. This was fun. My first podcast.
And our first guest.
It could only go up from here.
So, listener, thank you for joining us. Beg you to comment, like us, subscribe, give us love. We're not afraid to pander. And we will see you next time on Misbehavior.